What up, gamers? With patch 14.9, we got a whole lot of new Ornn items. And so in today's video, I'm going to be going through all of the new Ornn items and talk about what they do, and then go and dig into the data and talk about some of the best users of the item. Now, the data doesn't tell everything, so I'll talk a little bit about just intuitively what makes sense, even if it's not performing well in the data. And if any of you guys has some dark technology that will not show up in the data, make sure to put it in the comment section below. I'm sure everyone will appreciate learning from that. Other than that, I will talk about the old items. I'll just explain what they do and intuitively what they're supposed to use if you're a new player. But mainly this video, we're going to just focus on the new Ornn items. So with that out of the way, let's get into this. First up is Talisman of Ascension. So Talisman of Ascension, it gives you both of the offensive stats and then 400 health, AD and AP. And then after 18 seconds, gain 100% max health and 150% increased damage for the rest of the combat. I think those numbers actually might be a little bit different right now. But this is obviously going to be really good on all of the hero augment users, and bruisers are going to be the primary beneficiaries of this item, as well as units like Aurelia, who are alive a long time and who live a long time and have really high base stats. All of the legendaries, just if you guys are unfamiliar with looking through data like this, all of the legendaries will always perform super well, just because it means you have a legendary on your board. It means you're probably level 9 is usually why. They will always perform high in the stats. So just know that whenever you're interpreting data here. But Shin and York with the hero augments, this is like gigabits. Like, you're going to win the game if you can hit the board and you have Talisman of Ascension. Kobako's hero augment, Garen's hero augment can be good as well. It just doesn't really show up in the data here. And then obviously legendaries like Zaya at the end, she's like staying alive at the end of the fight, and then Big Cass at the end of the fight, one shots, that sort of thing. And then can be good on units like Syndra as well, who have very tanky builds whenever you're playing like 7 Faded and that sort of thing. So the two types of units you want to use this on: really tanky units that you think you can keep alive to the end of the fight. And then the second type of unit you want to use it on is when you have a really big frontline team. And so if you're making it to where you have a lot of legendaries, you do have a big team, so big frontline team where you know that they can cast at the end of the fight, like Syndra and Vertical Faded, Ash and Vertical Porcelain, where you know the fight is going to go long and you'll be good to go. Okay. Next up is Sniper's Focus. Guys, it gives you all the offensive stats, all the AD offensive stats, and a little bit of AP. You gain 1 attack range. Damage is increased by each hex in between the holder and their target. Just really good on backline AD carries, usually, especially snipers and trick shots. I mean, of course, but also it can be very good on units like Lilia, who casts across the fight. Not as good on units like Syndra. We're not really digging the data on this one. Eternal Winter, everybody should know this one. Gives you armor and health. Enemies who damage the holder are chilled, and then after 7 chills, they stun the dude. This item is exceptionally good. It's usually the best Ornn item, almost always has been for years. Sometimes it's not, but it almost always is generically extremely good. It just goes on your main tank, or sometimes you can put it on your off tank. You don't have to really position for it too much in the late game. In the late game, everybody has so much AoE, everyone's just kind of hitting, but you just put it on your tankiest unit. Usually gonna be like Galio, Annie, Thresh, that sort of thing. What it shows on the screen right there. It's gonna be good for you. You'll be good to go. Early game, make sure you position in front of their carry, and you'll be good to go there. Infinity Force gives you a bunch of stats. Generally better on frontline AD carries because they can use the hybrid stats the best. So yeah, things like Yone, Gnar, Kayn, Lee Sin, shit like that. You'll be good to go. Next up, Suspicious Trenchcoat. This is a very cool item. So you gain attack speed and health, but the more important effect is once per combat at 50% health, the holder splits into 3 copies of themselves each with 33% maximum health. So intuitively, this is going to be extremely good on units that just have like high value casts and are just generally good on like low item economy. So units like Ornn and Udyr are going to be like the easiest simple users, people very good on low item economy, just generally strong units who buy you a lot of time. Other than that, usually going to be good on units like bruisers and stuff because they have a lot of health and they also buy you a lot of time. Lysandra, great as well. If you can get her, if the other Lysandras actually cast, it can be amazing. But yeah, other than that, like tanks like Silas and Galio, because again, it utilizes maximum health, so it's going to be very good on bruisers. And then high value units who operate well in low item economy like Ornn, Udyr, Rakan, Wukong. Wukong's just a legendary, can be good there. Nautilus is just tough to use because Nautilus is just not, his other copies aren't going to cast, but it can be fine. But yeah, good on low item economy units, and you're good to go. Next up is Anima Visage. Guys, you gain magic resist and health, and then you heal for 2.5% of maximum health every second. Goes on your tanks. Pretty easy. Lightshield Crest, you gain both type of resist. Every 3 seconds, shields the lowest percent health ally for 50% of the holder's combined armor and magic resist. This is probably going to be best on your main tank. Intuitively, this makes a whole lot of sense on bruisers and behemoths because they have so much resist already that whenever they'll share their resist whenever they do the shields and that sort of thing. And then bruisers make a lot of sense because they can just utilize the stats really well. And then people who shield the lowest health ally like Galio. So let's look through here. And obviously legendaries are going to perform amazing with these items. You'll be good to go. But other than that, as you can see, mostly behemoths and bruisers up here at the top performing the best in the data. But in general, just put it on your tanks and you'll be good to go. Next up is Manazane, and Manazane just gives you all the offensive stats in the world, plus some mana. After casting for the first time in combat, gain 120 mana over 5 seconds. Generally, this is just very good on high value backline casters, AD or AP. So units like Kaisa, Morgana, Xayah, that sort of thing. Not as good on Ashe because you want her to be attacking a lot. Lilia can be very good. Even Syndra, who mana walks herself, it's still fine. You'll be good to go. And then obviously high value legendary units can be very good, like Wukong especially, because he has such low mana. He'll just chain cast. But if you have especially if you have something like a QSS on him or something. But yeah, high value casters in the back one, usually who you want to use it on, and then legendaries, and you'll be good to go. And next up, we have Innervating Locket. I don't know how to say this word. Whatever. Purple Locket. You gain health and mana. The holder gains 2% of their total mana whenever they are hit by an attack. Each cast restores 20% of the holder's max health over 3 seconds. So this is obviously going to be extremely good on any unit that already stacks a lot of HP. So like Bruisers, Ornn, who's just super tanky with Dryad. So like Bruisers, Ornn, and Annie obviously makes the most sense. And any unit that would usually want to have an adaptive helm on them is going to be very good, excluding Amumu, because Amumu already pretty much heals the full whenever he casts. So that's why it doesn't actually perform super well in the data. So if you have 3-star Cho'Gath, makes complete sense. Legendaries, of course. Gnar can be very good. Gnar can just be very good. Gnar is really good with a lot of these items. Like a lot of these items just give him very good stats that he wants. Garen with his hero augment, legendaries, of course, tanky units. You're good to go. Next up is Death's Defiance. This just goes on frontline 80 carries usually. Can also go onto tanks. Pretty simple. You gain all the offensive AD stats that you want in the world and plus some armor. And then you gain some Omnivamp and a bleed effect. Yeah, frontline 80 carries, you're good to go. Gameboy's Blade is usually just something you want to take really early on in the game to generate a little bit of extra economy. Build a lot of frontline and then just use this to gain an econ lead. It's not very good to actually like have this on your main carry in the late game. Usually you just use it to gain an economy lead. And again, you gain some attack speed per gold in your thing. You gain a little bit of AP. And then each attack has a chance to drop some gold. So that's why it's a little bit better in the early game. Going to use it just on any backline carry in the early game. It's pretty simple. Hullcrusher is a tank item. So you gain all these great tank stats plus some attack speed. And then combat start for no adjacent allies, gain 600 health. Usually you put this on tanks. If you have to take this in the early game, put it on a main tank, put it on the side. And then later on in the game, usually you put it onto an off tank or a frontline carry, usually not your main frontline carry, like an off carry. And then sometimes if you have to, you can put this item on Gnar, and you can be good to go. Diamond Hands next up. This is more of a early game item that you take to generate an economy lead. So you gain some ability power and some health, and once per combat at 50% health, gain invulnerability. Gain invulnerability and gain 1 gold. Typically you want to put this onto frontline carries or tanks. But yeah, you generally just take this early to generate an economy lead. And as you can see, the placement rate is really good. It's like the best or second best of any of the items. And that's just because you're taking it early and you gain an economy lead. Next up is Luden's Tempest. You gain both of the offensive stats, AD and AP. 100% of overkill damage plus 100 is dealt as magic damage to the 3 nearest enemies. So this generally is best on units that overkill often, like a Lune and Caitlyn, or units who cast a lot, like Syndra and Lilia and the like that, Kog'Maw, that sort of thing. Some of those aren't going to perform super well in the data, but intuitively, that's what makes sense. And obviously legendaries will always perform super well with the item, but thinking about units that really overkill, Xayah overkills a lot, Azir overkills a lot, Kog'Maw overkills a lot, Janna sometimes overkill, but she casts a lot regardless. Lilia overkills a lot, Lune overkills a lot. And then Caitlyn is great with the item. I know it doesn't perform super well in the data, but that's because you're ending with a Caitlyn on your board. Probably shouldn't be doing that most of the time. But she can be really good with the item, especially if you have a lot of frontline in the early game and you build a Spear of Sojin, comboed with Luden's Tempest. It can give you a lot of tempo. And next up, Wit's End. It gives you 30% attack speed, 30 magic resist. So attacks deal magic damage per hit, and then heals the holder for 35% of all magic damage dealt. So intuitively, it makes you feel like this should be good on Ashe, but the problem is Ashe doesn't do a lot of magic damage. This item is like tailor-made for Bard, and then it's also really good on like things like Teemo and that sort of thing. Backline AP carries that you don't mind attacking really fast. So units like Janna, Lune, and like Dragonlord builds can be good as well. So it makes the most sense here. And so let's look at this. Yeah, tailor-made for Bard here. Obviously really good on the legendaries. I can see Universe is good on Yone. He attacks very fast. He likes the stats that it gives you. He just doesn't really deal magic damage himself. Kindred makes a lot of sense to me. Aurelia makes some sense just because she really likes the stats that the item gives. But however, you really want to have on AP units that can deal some magic damage who you want to attack really fast. Again, tailor-made for Bard, and like Azir attacks really fast. Next up is Forbidden Idol. It just gives you all the tank stats in the world, and shields have 50% of their value converted to max health instead. Tailor-made for Tahm Kench, Thresh, Cho'Gath, stuff like that. Could be good on Galio as well. So let's just look and see what performs well in the data. Rakan, of course. Yeah, Cho'Gath, Tom. Set's just a legendary unit. Ornn, of course. Udyr can be good. I mean, he's just a legendary unit. Lowy makes a lot of sense as well. You'd be good to go. So just tanks, but generally the ones that shield more is going to be better, like Tom, Cho'Gath, Rakan, Ornn, stuff like that. You'll be good to go. Next up is Gold Collector. Gold Collector just gives you attack damage, critical strike chance, and then you have the ability to execute units below 12% maximum health, and then you have a 40% chance to gain a gold from that. This is generally just an item you take in the early game and you combo it with an Infinity Edge or a Last Whisper, so you're critting a lot, especially an Infinity Edge, helps out a lot. Extremely good onto Kai'Sa and Xayah. It's fine on snipers as well, but generally you just take this to gain early game tempo, or if you're playing Fortune and then you get this as a cash out, very good with trick shots when you're going like trick shot, when you're going Fortune into trick shot, which is a common strategy. Be good to go there. Zhonya's Paradox gives you AP, it gives you all the resists in the world, and then once per combat at 40% health, become invulnerable and untargetable for 3 seconds. What's very important about this is that it actually makes you untargetable. So units will de-aggro and they'll walk away from you. So that means you do not want this on your main tank. It can go on a frontline unit. It's great on a frontline unit, especially a unit like Silas. He loves all of these stats, and while he's untargetable and invulnerable, he can heal back up to full with his ability. Really good on Lee Sin, actually. He actually really likes these stats as well. He's a good AP ratio. So frontline AP carries and backline AP units with high value cast, or units that you usually are the last one left alive. So if you're carrying like a reroll Teemo build, very good on reroll Teemo, very good on Syndra, Lilia, Azir, that sort of thing. Hui, if you need them to carry. People whose damage comes out a little bit slow and are usually the last ones left alive in a fight. Make sure whenever you use this item that you want to have that unit separated from if you're putting on a backline carry, you want them separated from everyone else. So if you have like your Syndra on one side and everybody else on the other side, if your Syndra gets targeted early on in the fight, they will target the Syndra and then will go over this direction, as well as it saves you from getting hit by AoE abilities at the beginning of the fight, because you don't want your Zhonya's to proc until the very end of the fight whenever you're in like a 1 versus 3 scenario. So that's some good shit there. Okay, RFC, gain 50% attack speed, gain 1 attack range, increased by 1 whenever the holder kills an enemy. So this is an old item that has been in TFT forever, just as a craftable item. So if you played some old sets, you should know exactly how to use this. Typically, you will always put this on frontline 80 carries that can benefit from an increased range. So a unit like Kiana makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't really make sense on units that you actually want to take aggro. Units that you just want to give them range and you don't care if they take aggro. They don't need to take aggro. So for example, like Volibear is not a very good unit to have with this item. In general, it could be good, but in general, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because you actually want them to take aggro because they generate a lot of their mana from taking damage. But a unit like Kiana makes a lot of sense because you don't care if she takes damage. Her mana is 20. You just want her to deal some damage. Additionally, RFC is very good on units that you just don't want them to move. So units like Ashe and stuff, you don't want her to move. You just want her to be attacking and you want her to just keep her sniper range, keep her sniper attacks going. And units like Syndra and Lilia, especially, you just want them to cast. You don't want them ever walking. That can be good as well. I think a lot of people miss that part, that it actually is very good on backliners a lot of times. So Yeah, another one like Zaya. You don't ever want her to move. You just want her to be casting. Lysandra makes a lot of sense. And again, legendaries are always going to perform really well. See, Syndra performs super well. Intuitively doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you think about that, you just want her casting. You don't want her moving. Aurelia just utilizes the stats really well. The attack speed, the upfront attack speed is really nice, and you'll be good to go there. Next up is Blighting Jewel, and that is 40 AP that you get with this. Dealing magic damage reduces the target's magic resist by 3. If their magic resist is 0, this grants the holder 5 mana instead. So intuitively, obviously you want to put this on AP units. It makes sense on units that have damage over time effects or multiple instances of damage. So units like, Teemo and Morgana is an example of damage over time. Syndra and Lilia is an example of units who have multiple instances of damage. This makes a whole lot of sense to put this on these style of units, and obviously it'll always perform well in the legendaries. Udyr makes some sense. Teemo, obviously, like Teemo and Morgana are the ones that make the most sense. And then, as I said before, Syndra makes a lot of sense here. Let's see where Lilia. I'm surprised Lilia is so far down in the data because she does have multiple instances of damage. But yeah, definitely the chief users of these items are going to be like Teemo, Morgana, Syndra, and you'll be good to go. As well as Lysandra also does some damage over time effects. Next up is Seeker's Armguard. So it gives you AP and resist. Takedowns increase the holder's armor and magic resist and ability power by 10, and then increase by 15 if they actually kill the target. This item is tailor-made for Silas, and then also can be really good on units like Ornn and that sort of thing. Units who are really tanky who just get some takedowns because of their AoE and that sort of thing can be very good. But as I said, obviously very good on Shin with his hero augment. Good on the legendary units. Rakan makes a lot of sense. Wukong just always performs well. Udyr makes a lot of sense. But yeah, tailor-made for Silas. But the item just right now just generally doesn't seem that good. But I would say general like Silas, Ornn, and then the legendary units should be good to go. Next up is Lich Bane. That's 30 ability power plus 15 mana. The holder's first attack after each ability cast deals some bonus magic damage. So this is going to be just good on people who you want to chain cast or building blue buff on. That sort of thing. Going to be great on units like Syndra, Kindred, Teemo, and Invokers. Invokers cast a lot. So let's just look at this. Yeah, Kindred, obviously like the GOAT user of this item. So if you're playing like Kindred, Gnar reroll, makes a whole lot of sense there. And then other than that, just units that cast a lot. Like it can make some sense on Silas because he casts a lot. He's just better off with other items usually. And then, Syndra's going to be really good here. I mean, it's not performing really well in the data, but intuitively makes a whole lot of sense. Not performing super well in the data, but Lilia makes a lot of sense. Just come back on next patch. Maybe it'll be performing better. Next up is Fishbones, and this gives you 30% attack damage and attack speed, doubles the range, the attack range, and causes each of their attacks to target a random enemy. So this is generally going to be best on backline AD carries. This item's a little bit weird, but since it doubles the holder's range, it's still good on all of the units that you don't want them to move. So all backline AD carries, and even Syndra, even if she doesn't like these stats, it's still really good for her to not move, and that extra attack speed is quite nice, and you'd be good to go there. So that's who you want to use it on. This item's kind of weird to take. I don't ever really take this on purpose. I kind of just think it's like not that strong, but if you're going to take it, obviously good on the legendaries, good on backline carries like Ashe. Ashe especially because she's a sniper. And then units like Syndra, because again, you just don't want her to move and you just want her to chain cast. Also, additionally, units like Syndra, it can help them because Syndra can get like stuck on a target and then she can aggro other things. Whereas units like Zaya and units like Kai'Sa, Zaya, and Ashe, it doesn't really matter as much what target they're hitting because their abilities deal most of their damage. Their ability does AoE, but especially like Syndra, just helping her switch off of a main tank can be very beneficial to you. All right, next up is the Kitten Mittens, and you gain 60% attack speed, shrinks the holder. So their hitbox is a little bit smaller, and they can move around the combat a little bit better. I mean, not hitbox is smaller, but like they can move around combat a little bit better. Like size actually matters, guys. Size matters. Sorry, but yeah, it helps you move around. So generally, it's gonna be a little bit better on like frontline units, frontline carries. So shrinks the holder, grants them increased movement speed, 20% damage reduction, and immunity to chill. So intuitively, this makes a lot of sense on like Kayn, Yone. I don't think it actually performs well in the data, but it makes sense on those style of units, and also makes sense on Udyr, stuff like that. So Udyr, what's his face? Wukong makes a whole lot of sense. So let's look at it. Gnar, of course. Gnar is very good with this as well. The damage, the flat DR is really nice. Wukong, of course. Legendaries, of course. Let's see who else performs decently. Shin with the hero augment, that makes some sense. He likes the attack speed, of course. And then things like Kayn, Lee Sin, Yone, All these things make a lot of sense. Volibear makes a lot of sense. You'll be good to go. And next up is Trickster's Glass. It gives you a whole bunch of random stats here. Some crit chance, attack speed, armor, magic resist. So you summon a clone with 70% of your max health and plus 30% max mana, meaning that it'll take them longer to cast. And you can't equip items to the clone. Usually in the early game, you just want to use this on another tank just to give you more frontline, and especially a tank that is upgraded and is being and you're utilizing their defensive traits. So if you have like a 2-star Cho'Gath and you're using Behemoth Mythic, it would go on the Cho'Gath rather than like the Malphite that's in your comp, right? Because you're not utilizing their traits as well. So just your tankiest unit in the early game usually. And then late game, it's just like high value units that like Ornn, Udyr, like units that'll cast and units that are guaranteed to give you value on low item economy, whether or not they cast or if they're like likely to cast. Like units like Nautilus is just not very likely to cast. So it's kind of tough to put on someone like that. Okay, next up is Unending Despair. It gives you armor and health. Whenever a shield on the holder breaks, 100% of that shield initial value is dealt to the nearest enemy as magic damage. So just units that like to shield themselves, like who have a lot of health, like Tom, Cho'Gath, that sort of thing is gonna make a lot of sense. And then even units like Annie, who if you're playing in Invoker builds and you're just being shielded by Janna and stuff like that, can make some sense here. So let's look at this. And yeah, Ornn, of course, you know, always gonna perform well on legendaries, always gonna perform well in the hero augment builds. But yeah, Cho'Gath, really good. Could perform really well on Galio. It doesn't perform well right now, but I could see a world where it does, maybe a later patch. Rakan especially, super good user, and we'll be good to go. Next up is Prowler's Call, and that is 25% AD, 25% crit chance. After killing a target, shed negative effects and dash to the furthest target within 4 hexes. The next 2 critical strikes deal 60% bonus critical strike damage. This item is just tailor-made for Reapers. Put it on Reapers. I could see in a world where it's good on like, maybe could be good on like Galio Lee Sin as well in some duelist builds. Can be good on maybe if you are doing like a vertical heavenly Wukong. But in general, guys, this item is made for Reapers. Next up is Deathfire Grasp. You gain some ability power and some starting mana. Combat starts, you blast the current target for 20% of their maximum health as magic damage. For the next 10 seconds, deal 25% more magic damage. Damage dealt to the blasted target is increased by 35%. Really important whenever you use this item, you want to position it in front of their most valuable unit. So especially if they have a frontline carry like Kayn, Wukong, or something like that, you want to make sure you're in front of them. If not, in front of their high value tank to try to just burst them at the beginning of the fight before they cast, like an Annie or a Nautilus can be good. Goes on backline AP carries, Lilia, Syndra, that sort of thing. Not a very good item right now, but yeah. Next up is Silvermere Dawn. So you gain a bunch of attack damage and some resist, grants immunity to stuns, and the holder's attack stun the target for 0.8 seconds. The holder attack speed, however, is locked at 0.5. So this is kind of a weird item. It's really going to Wukong. This item is like really weird to take. Has some really good stats, but like frontline 80 carries that you don't care about their attack speed that much. So like the only one that really makes a lot of sense to me is Wukong, but let's see what performs on the data. This one, oh, Gnar, of course. So you do like when Gnar casts, but also he doesn't need to. Those stats he gets are really good. So like he can just be walking around bonking people, but Wukong makes a lot of sense. Shin with the hero augment, because you don't necessarily need him to cast, I guess. You know what? Never mind. I don't think it's that good on him. I don't know why it's performing super well. Yeah. I don't know. This item's kind of weird. This one I feel uncomfortable recommending things. Lee Sin, I think you actually really want him to cast. Kayn makes a lot of sense. However, you want him to do his first cast. I don't know, man. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about this. Kha'Zix makes a lot of sense, though. Next up is Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. You gain 50% attack speed. Attacks deal an additional 50% damage as physical damage and heals the holder for the damage dealt. The holder cannot cast their ability. Oh, sorry. You can cast when you have Silvermere Dawn, so it makes a lot of sense on Kayn. My bad. I get these two items confused. But because both of them feel really awkward to use. So this one, it's just the worst item. So it's really hard for me to recommend. Like it makes sense on Tristana because you don't really care if she casts. Aurelia makes a lot of sense because you don't care as much if she casts. Her cast is nice. But like units like Lee Sin, you really want them to cast. Gnar, you kind of want them to cast. By the way, Gnar is really good with that last item we were talking about. The Silvermere Dawn, I was just tripping. I got them mixed up. Yeah, Gnar makes a lot of sense with Silvermere Dawn. I don't know, man. Don't take Corrupt Vampiric Scepter at this time. Like I'll have to like revisit this item. It's just really hard to use right now. It's just not very good. All right, next up is Spectral Cutlass, and you gain 40% attack damage, 20% critical strike damage. Combat start teleports the holder to mirrored hex on the enemy side of the board. After 8 seconds, the holder returns to your original location. So super, super, super good on Reapers. I could even see a world where you put this on like a Xayah or Kai'Sa and just make sure you have a main tank right there, because you're gonna make your backliner into an assassin. I could totally see that being very good. You just gotta, there's some positioning tech. You gotta make sure you have a really strong tank, because they will de-aggro and will turn around and start hitting your dude. So other than that, just frontline AD carries like Kayn, Yone, Wukong, stuff like that. Like, I'm gonna look at the data, but like this is like a really intuitive item. Gnar, of course, makes a lot of sense. So Sandra is another like cool tech. Go to the back line and kill some people with Sandra. Set, you can go to the back line. But set you actually want to pick up tanks, so it doesn't make as much sense. You want him to take aggro. Lee Sin can make some sense. You go back to the back line, kick their heads off. But yeah, look out for some tech where you do like some Xayah stuff. Like that like some Xayah or some Kai'Sa stuff. That sounds really cool. And lastly, guys, finally at the end, we have Horizon Focus. And so you gain some mana, resist, and health. Stunning an enemy causes lightning to strike them, dealing 30% of their maximum health as magic damage. This one is really cool, especially because it gives starting mana. Super, super good on Nautilus. This item is tailor-made for Nautilus. You'll see a Nautilus 1, no synergies, deal 3k per fight if he casts one time. And if you can get him to cast multiple times, forget about it. Also very good on Lux. Very good. And then can be good on units like Annie, although she only CCs the one time. Volibear, once duelists are a little bit stronger, can be very good. That only CCs one time in the fight, but he is a legendary. Likes the stats. The mana at the beginning of the fight is good. Lysandra, same reason. Udyr, same reason. Just likes the stats, the upfront mana, and the CC, and you're good to go. But anyways, guys, this was pretty much it for the item list, the little bit of a guide we're doing here. I didn't really talk about what are the best items on the current patch. That is meta dependent. Mainly what I wanted to talk about is like just how you're actually supposed to use them and think about these items. But just looking at the worst items, like don't use Vampiric Scepter. I don't think Rapidfire is as bad as it's Rapidfire and Luden's is as bad. Here it's just people don't know how to utilize them. Things like Prowler's Call, again, people are just probably not taking them in the best spot. Super good on units like Kayn and stuff like that. Because like some items, like they're so niche that they're going to perform so bad in the data because people are taking them when they don't have the niche scenario. Like Prowler's Call, you want it to be you only want to take this when you're playing Reapers, really. So if you're ever taking it outside of that, it's going to perform really bad in the data. So just be careful looking at data. But things like Vampiric Scepter, I don't know, man. I think this item either needs to be reworked or like maybe in a different meta it can work. I don't know. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much it for the video. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.